My previous criticisms or questions about Ryan Poles and his strategy and his approach so far as Chicago Bears general manager does not take away from the fact that what happened in 2022, what he did in 2022, ultimately paid off, right? The Bears ended up with the #1 overall pick in the 2023 NFL Draft. They also went into this offseason with the most cap space out of any team going into free agency, and by a good margin too. If you're thinking about bottoming out and really tearing it down to the studs and rebuilding the house, that's how you do it, right? So, at least when you look at the Bears and their history and that perpetuation, of the cycle of mediocrity, the mediocrity of the McCaskey way, good old Bears football! In some ways, Ryan Poles slightly broke that cycle with how everything played out in 2022. Yeah, it's true. And contrary to the thoughts of some Bears fans I've seen on social media, Ryan Poles pulled off a fantastic trade with the Carolina Panthers. Getting closer to the draft wasn't going to give him increasingly more leverage. It may have potentially resulted in less leverage, who knows. But he was able to trade away and trade out of pick #1 in a draft with perhaps up to 4 quarterbacks going in the top 10 or maybe even the top 7 or 8 picks. And the Bears not really being a threat themselves to draft a replacement quarterback for Justin Fields. The Bears' leverage there was more about the fact of, well, if you don't do it, somebody else will, than hey, you really got to move us off of this pick. In response for that position where they had some, but not the ultimate leverage, to move back 8 spots to go from picks 1 to 9, Ryan Poles also got pick number 61 in this year's draft. He got a 2024 first-round pick, a 2025 second-round pick, and he got a wide receiver that, for his team at least, will be wide receiver 1 in DJ Moore, which I would put a value on of maybe a second and third-round pick, somewhere along those lines. To move down 8 slots, get all of that, strengthen your position for the 2023 through 2025 drafts, get your wide receiver 1 with a decent cap hit the next 2 seasons, that's something worth celebrating. I 100% agree. If you want to celebrate Ryan Poles for making that trade, that is fine. I point to that as the single best move that Ryan Poles has made in his time as general manager of the Chicago Bears. And when you look at it, that was the franchise-changing decision, right? We'll see how it ultimately plays out, but that's the most important decision you could argue that he had, even more than the decision of hiring his head coach and so forth. Just keep in mind, though, that all of this maneuvering to get picks is great, but it comes down to what you do with them. You look at the NBA and the Philadelphia 76ers, and for years their fans were, Sam Hinkie, trust the process. You can get all these picks, but you got to know what the fuck you're doing with them. And that dumbass drafted a center 3 straight years at the top of the NBA draft. And eventually got it right with Joel Embiid, but before that there was Nerlens Noel and there was Jahlil Okafor. He couldn't see the way the NBA game was evolving. So my point is, getting the picks is nice, but you got to do something with it, and you got to hit on those ultimately because none of the other shit matters. What it does do, though, is it gives the Bears more ammunition to be able to help Justin Fields now and later. And if things go sideways in 2023, even 2024, it better positions the Bears to be able to move on from Justin Fields if so required. So that is all great. That's wonderful. But this King Poles stuff, the watch Poles cook, this Ryan Poles hero worship, that shit needs to stop. At least for now. Can we wait till the Bears are actually a Super Bowl threat before you start talking like this? Can you wait until they look like a contender, feel like a contender, play like a contender, are a contender, and a legit one, before you start talking like this? It's fucking weird. Because when you look at his history so far, it certainly doesn't lend to the credence of let Poles cook and watch out, here comes King Poles doing it again. The dude's first decision was to hire a defensive-minded head coach from a team and a defense that didn't even make the frickin' playoffs the year before. In a league that more and more continues to transition towards an offense-first philosophy, out of the 8 teams that were left in the playoffs, the final 8 teams, 7 of them were run by an offensive-minded head coach, including all 4 of the conference championship game teams, the 2 Super Bowl participants, so meaning the Super Bowl loser and the Super Bowl winner. But Ryan Poles went in an entirely different direction. His first attempted free agent signing last year was a defensive lineman that failed the damn physical. So not only was his first approach, or first priority to go try and fix the fucking defense, which is dumb, he went try and sign a player that didn't even pass a damn physical. Look at all those free agent signings he had. A bunch of 1-year, kind of low-risk, medium reward guys, and almost none of them paid off. Knowing that your future of your organization is based on how Justin Fields develops or doesn't develop, what does he do? He follows up that free agent philosophy by, of course, spending his first 2 picks in the second round on fucking defensive backs. And then follows that up in the third round by drafting a 25-year-old wide receiver. This is not king shit anything. This is dumb dick stupidity. He also failed to trade Roquan Smith and Robert Quinn before the season. You know, where Quinn was coming off of a massive season. Should have been able to get more in return. Yeah, end up waiting until he has a kind of crappy first half of the season and only get a late 4th round pick in return from the Eagles for trading him. That is not a win. That is a fucking L, if I've ever seen one. He trades Roquan Smith during the season instead of before the season. You have all that saga going into training camp. And Roquan ends up being first-team All-Pro. The Bears traded a guy who ended up being first-team All-Pro in the middle of the season and got a second-round pick for him. No, that's not me saying they should have kept Roquan Smith or anything like that. I'm just saying, when you look at this, this is not King Poles shit. And oh, by the way, let's not forget, ultimately, that the Bears did finish 3-14. It's really odd, weird behavior to be talking about a guy like he's done something great when there is so much of the body of evidence of work to suggest that this isn't good. But everything, again, was pointing towards this offseason and the future. 2022 was a palate cleanser. Like, you trade away Khalil Mack to get a second-round pick, blah, 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 blah. But are you so sure about his philosophy in free agency? I grant you, there's some really good value signings here. T.J. Edwards, good value signing. DeMarcus Walker, really good value signing. Andrew Billings, kind of limited, but a good run stuffer, solid signing. Deontay Foreman, solid signing. There's a bunch of these solid signings, but my problem is you don't go and get the most cap space to just value shop. The dude has fucking hot dog taste on a Kobe State budget this offseason. It doesn't make any goddamn sense. But the one place he decided to splurge was on the linebacker position. Again, running counterculture to what the NFL is doing. That doesn't make sense. With the signings of Tremaine Edmunds and T.J. Edwards, the Bears' salary cap investment, just on those 2 guys alone, more than doubles the Eagles' investment on their entire linebacking core in 2022 and quadrupled that of the Chiefs. The 2 teams that made it to the fucking Super Bowl. He didn't sign any high-profile guys to the trenches on either side of the ball. When you knew that the trenches on both sides of the ball were the biggest weakness, the biggest need area for this fucking team. And you look at him now, and if you want to count DeMarcus Walker as a full pass rusher, fine, let's do that. For argument's sake. You're still short 3 pass rushers on your defensive line. Really, honestly, you're short 3 real starters on your defensive line. You also went into this offseason needing, at a minimum, 3 new starters on the offensive line, and you've acquired 1 in Nate Davis. My argument here is, you look at this, with all this money to spend, and maybe the best move that he made was not being able to sign Mike McGlinchey, because I can tell you that shit was going to go sideways in a hurry, and Bears fans were going to hate that guy for years. Promise you on that. But Now he's kind of pigeonholed himself into a situation where he has to go into the draft and heavily invest in the trenches. And maybe that's the strategy. And that's not a terrible strategy, I want to say. But it feels like Ryan Poles doesn't fully understand the game that he's in. And my ultimate argument is this. We are a long way from being able to write the book on Ryan Poles and his tenure as Chicago Bears general manager one way or another. It is far too early to sit there and say that he sucks. It is far too early to sit there and say that he is great. Especially the great part. The only thing you could really point to and say that he's done that's great is trading back from 1 to 9. Now that is great. I would agree. But it still comes down to what he does with those picks matters most. So all I'm merely saying here is perhaps Bears fans should wait until they see the team on the field, they see the product in 2023, maybe 2024, before they start crowning Ryan Poles' ass. I realize when we talk about the Bears, the bar is set so freaking low because that is, of course, Bears football! But the way I'm seeing folks reacting to like second and third level free agent signings, like it's the second coming of Jesus Christ here. This is weird behavior. Just stop it. Just let's see how things play out before we start crowning his ass. Is that too much to freaking ask here?